Hello, my name is Sue Carney, and I'm a psychology major and a McNair Scholar at the University of Oregon. My mentor is Dr. Melissa Brunken of the University of Oregon School of Music and Dance. Many thanks to Dr. Brunken for all her support and to the folks at Cure for the invitation to speak to you today. The title of my paper is Compound Losses Suffered by Singers During and After COVID, a Literature Review. For those who may be unfamiliar with the concept, literature reviews are the foundational level of research projects. As the name implies, a literature review takes a survey of a research area as a whole by gathering and reviewing articles, and it is a required first step in considering a study. A literature review informs the author and subsequently the reader about current research in any field by identifying key issues and debates, providing directions for further research, and establishing context and rationale for the study. A silent spring. COVID was devastating on so many levels, from the ill and dying to the unemployed and desperate, to essential workers who laid their lives on the line every day. No one was unaffected. In the wake of the pandemic, there have been numerous studies on almost every aspect of what happened during the pandemic. Who was affected? How were they affected? Some studies focused on demographic and occupational differences in outcomes, some on economics, still more on long COVID. This study looks at the particular case of singers who suffered multiple losses as a result of the pandemic. Our research question is, how were singers as a group affected by the COVID pandemic? Our methods. To examine the matter, we began with the following keyword searches, beginning with the broadest terms and narrowing the subjects until the final search, which should be tightly limited to articles directly on the subject of the research question. Our first search was singing and health, our broadest search. This grounds the study by establishing a background. Next came singing and respiratory health. This is a second, narrower search, and it demonstrates how important singing can be in treating Parkinson's, COPD, and other respiratory ailments. Finally, singing and COVID. In this section, we address the direct impacts of COVID on singers. With this kind of search, it is important to eliminate terms that do not apply to the subject at hand. Since our focus was not droplets, contagion, economic issues, or the music industry in general, we excluded articles on those subjects from our review. Initially, we had decided to exclude articles about intubation, but that turned out to be one of the most important findings of the study. Intubation saved lives, but destroyed voices, leaving both singers and non-singers with serious vocal complications. What is intubation? A tube for forcing oxygen into the lungs is inserted into the larynx and guided down the trachea, where it remains until the patient perishes or becomes healthy enough to breathe on their own. The tube can be taped in place on the patient's face and typically remains in the throat and trachea for weeks in the case of COVID. You can see intubation machines in the top half of the poster. This may seem like a brutal treatment, but the alternative was likely a slow death by drowning. The damage that intubation was causing to patients was not known until later in the pandemic. It was not a good choice, but it was a chance at life. Now, our key references. Also called seed articles, the key references here were used to chain to other related articles. This is a common literature review technique that involves searching the reference section of a seed article, choosing some of the references, and then using the reference section of those articles to chain to other articles. Another chaining technique is to search for articles that cite the original article, and then articles that were cited by those articles. This is a great way to get a sense of the field. To chain our seed articles, we used a program called Connected Papers, which I highly recommend for the search phase of any literature review. It provides a graphic interface linking related articles to one another that we found very clarifying. We found our articles on Google Scholar, UO Libraries, and Sci-Hub, and we saved them to Zotero. Once we had gathered the articles, we created an annotated bibliography. Each of the annotations answers the following questions. 1. Who did this research? 2. What did they do? 3. How did they do it? And 4. What did they discover? By this time, we had a complete database of the articles and annotations, and it was time to begin organizing the myriad articles into a smooth flow. We used a program called Obsidian to sort the articles, allowing us to move them around, clump them together, and map their relationships. This was a huge help. I highly recommend that you check out Obsidian. Indeed, it was exciting to apply the new AI programs to our literature review process. We left them out of the final step, writing the paper. But they were very helpful when organizing the information and creating the annotated bibliography. Results. This review examined 217 articles and created an annotated bibliography. We are in the process of working with our publisher for a 2025 standalone release of this literature review, which will also be part of a study currently in progress. Conclusions. COVID was very hard on singers. The nature of singing makes it one of the most highly contagious ways to spread COVID. As a result of this, virtually all singing everywhere ceased. Community and church choirs stopped meeting. Gigs were canceled. Therapeutic singers lost their jobs as hospitals closed. Parkinson's and COPD choirs stopped meeting. Jam sessions began excluding singers. It was truly a silent spring for humanity's songbirds. As our study shows, singing is a high-value activity for those who participate. Singers generally love to sing, and singing meets a variety of human needs. It creates a good feeling within the singer, whether solo or in a group. Look at the singers in the choir on this poster. Their faces collectively express the joy and deep feelings that keep them coming back to the choir. Each one of them reflects the complex emotions that singing brings about. All of them seek the opportunity to feel and express these emotions together. But what happens to singers if they are prevented from a gathering like this? After COVID, did they have withdrawals? In a sense, yes. Since singing contributes so strongly to health and well-being, singers really missed it. They reported sadness at the loss, which affected them emotionally, socially, and physically. This was true of both professional and amateur singers. And when the plague finally ended, the singing began again as soon as humanly possible. But for some singers, COVID marked the end of their song forever. Some still suffer symptoms of long COVID. Some have lingering vocal weaknesses from the virus. But by far the worst affected singers were those who fell ill early in the pandemic and required intubation to save their lives. Singers were not alone in suffering life-changing vocal injuries from this procedure. Many patients will always suffer from vocal cord paralysis, dysphonia, which is permanent hoarseness or inability to control pitch in singing or speech, and dysphagia, difficulty swallowing. This causes a loss of vocal control that makes further singing impossible. And this, in turn, triggers cascading losses for singers in societal roles, status, self-expression, and self-esteem. These singers also lose the health and mental health benefits of singing, and without the lift this gives them, they can become depressed. Ultimately, these permanently disabled singers have lost an irreplaceable skill, one that they've worked with love and patience to cultivate. This kind of loss is very hard to come to grips with emotionally and even existentially, and more study is needed to follow up on the healing of these injuries. This ends the presentation. Thank you for your kind attention.